years, China went from half of the US to double the US. So basically fourfold in 18 years,
Yeah.
right? And
Wow.
China growth is not stopping here. They're not bullish on Bitcoin. Nah, don't get me wrong. They might individually as a person might be,
Yeah. But not the
right?
government
I
as
know
the
Trump
entity.
family is.
Yeah.
I know Scott DeSantis is a Bitcoiner. I know Howard Lutnick is a Bitcoiner, and there are a few other Bitcoin supporters in the administration. Doesn't mean that they will have a legislation that will pass through Congress.
We are watching the two largest empires in human history right now fight a Cold War. But this time, the weapons aren't exactly nuclear. This time, the weapons are semiconductors, stablecoins, and even hash rate. Welcome back to Satoshi Sundays. This is episode 12, and I'm your host, Nicki. This is my dad, Global HODL, and we're here every single Sunday to talk Bitcoin and AI. This time, if you have been spending any time on X, you've definitely been seeing headlines. You've seen that the US and China are locked in a massive geopolitical chess game right now. And it's not just a political battle, this is literally an ideological war between American free market capitalism and Chinese state controlled communism. So, this war is currently bleeding into the three pillars of our future economy, which are AI, Bitcoin, and of course, your regular macro. Today, we are going to be breaking down the timeline of how we got here and, most importantly, where we are going next. We're going to use the frameworks that are most notably spoken about by Balaji Srinivasan. And if you don't know him, he is the head and founder of the Network School, Network State kind of organizations that are on the internet. Great, great guy. My dad and I absolutely love his content and his ideas on the collapse of the West, China versus the internet, other things that we're all going to unpack in this episode about how the world order is being rewritten. So, I guess by the end of this episode, you should be able to understand how the macro game is being played above you, how exactly you, as a sovereign individual, need to position your career and your treasury to survive the current war that we're going through. So, without further ado, that was a very, very long intro. Dad, welcome back to the show. How are you doing today? And are you ready to discuss some heavy, heavy US China games?
Yeah, I'm doing fantastic. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. I'm doing well. So let's dive right into it, right? To understand where this war is going, we have to quickly look back at how the, I guess, chessboard was set up. So I guess what I have to ask you here is what's going on, the US China? I mean, when did this rivalry start?
Uh, I think rivalry started, or the seeds of rivalry were planted about 40 years ago. More so in about like 20, 25 years ago when China entered the World Trade Organization. I think it was 2001, if I remember correct. But up until now, America was blinded by its exceptionalism. They always felt, oh, China is a third world country. People live in slums. They have no idea. We can, strong arm them whenever we want. And we saw a trailer of that in last April with the tariff tantrum, right? When President Trump came out and brought his big, the board of it, the countries and the tariff rates and whatnot, and they slammed China with 145% tariffs. The idea was, oh, we'll strong arm China. They'll surrender because they are so dependent on America. And they will and then they can enter a new trade deal with them and get better terms. What they found out was China isn't what they thought it was. And to put things in perspective, back in first Trump era, in his first presidential term, he slammed China with tariffs, especially on steel and whatnot. And at that time, US was a large part of China's exports. But over the last 8 years, China has been actively working on divesting from America. Right? So that's where what America learned, and that's the reason we saw a lot of a back and forth on tariffs. 145%, we're going to cut it, we're going to increase it, we're going to cut it. China reciprocated and whatnot. And then China basically strong armed America and said, hey, we do a lot of processing of rare earth materials or minerals, and we're not going to export them to you. Get lost. And for this, the AI arms race that we are in, your chips need rare earths, your batteries need rare earths, right? And a lot of other manufacturing need rare earths. And that's when America realized we can strong arm them. Since then, the way I'm seeing it playing out is US is trying to hurt China or basically get hold of on things that China needs, quote unquote oil, energy, because China doesn't produce that much oil, right? And that is the reason we saw what happened in Venezuela earlier this year, what's happening in Iran right now, and I won't be surprised if it happens in Cuba right after we settle Iran. Right? This is basically saying, okay, you control rare earths, we control oil, you need oil, we need rare earths, let's enter into a trade deal. Right? The other thing to think about this is in this AI era that we are moving towards, we need a bunch of chips. Guess what? 75% of the chips are manufactured in or around China. Right? TSMC, world's largest and the best semiconductor manufacturing company, based in Taiwan. That's America's backyard. No, sorry, not America, sorry, China's backyard.
China's, yeah.
China's backyard, right? And if China wants, they will stop those exports to America. And then NVIDIA and everybody else, they could do whatever the hell want, but we won't be able to do anything. Don't forget, we design chips in America, but they're manufactured in China.
Yeah.
Right? So this rivalry goes far back. And now it's coming to surface because China isn't that little tiny toddler that we could strong arm or kick around whenever we wanted, and they'll just whine a little and then come back right up. Now they are like a young man, like early 20s, which are probably stronger than the father or getting there. Right. So this is where we are. And the other thing that we are noticing is US tries to pick up the guns, and not in the literal terms, but metaphorically. Whenever we want to enter into a conflict, China plays conflict with trade.
Let's set a little bit more context. Let's talk about kind of how the US came into being a global superpower in the first place, right? I believe this was really just after World War II that the US began to gain dominance by building on free market capitalism, right? We had military supremacy and we established like the petrodollar. So let's talk a bit about that. Like, how did America position itself to be a superpower in I guess the 20th and 21st century?
Yeah. So let's try to understand what happened during the World War, especially the World War II, right? During that World War, all the older, superpowers, the UK, the Germanys, and the France and whatnot, they were destroyed, right? US's currency completely collapsed. The advantage that America had was the war was not on their home ground, right? There were no, soldiers fighting against, each other on American soil. They were all on the foreign land, which basically produced an output which meant that whole world has a lot of destruction where America did not. And because of the past research and investment that we had done, America was all manufacturing driven by then. They got this opportunity to basically help out the world in rebuilding. During that rebuilding, America gained a lot of wealth and a lot of power because the all the older powers were destroyed. There were two major powers left in the world: United States of America and USSR. Right? So the, for the next 40 years after the World War, or closer to 50 years, the entire focus was to maintain the balance between the socialist or the communist world and the capitalistic world, right? During this time, because there was no other competition, American dollar became the standard, and became the world reserve currency and whatnot. And from there on, America. But until 1991, till USSR got broken up, America still had somebody to compete with, somebody to fight with, even though it was more of a diplomatic fight, less of
Yeah.
the real war kind of stuff. What happened after that was, once USSR broke up, America has no contender, right? It was the only superpower, and that's where the blindfold came and that, oh, we are the best, nobody else is anywhere close to us, right?
Right.
But what was happening behind the scenes that America and rest of the world did not pay attention to was that China was growing very, very fast, right? Under America's, shadow. And then people were completely ignorant of that fact. And to put things in perspective, right? In 2005, US produced almost twice energy compared to China. America has grown roughly about at 1% a year. And I'll show you a chart. China is almost double, if not more, right? This is like 2023. In 2005, America was double China.
Hmm.
In 2023, China is double America. What happened? In 18 years, right, this is a clear example of how fast China was growing, right? And America was not growing. American power growth was less than 1%, right? In 18 years, China went from half of the US to double the US. So basically fourfold in 18
Yeah.
years,
Yeah.
right? And
Wow.
China growth is not stopping here. It's exponential from here, right? So this is just one example how fast China was growing when America was just celebrating its past success.
Hmm.
And that is what is problematic in my eyes.
Today. Yeah. I mean, this is really, really counterintuitive, isn't it? Because China is has state-controlled communism, right? Like that is their model. But then they've also become this like hyper-capitalist manufacturing power. How does that work?
Yeah. Um, I think it's you're right, it's counterintuitive because on surface, when sitting outside of China, when you look at China, like, oh, China is a a communist country, probably there's a lot of poverty there and whatnot. But in reality, if you look at China, all their policies, internal policies, are all about business growth, investment. The the only thing that is communist about this is government can choose what industries to favor at what point in time. So if you look at the recent history of China, China's real estate, which was propped by Chinese government for a very long time, and then for last 7, 8, maybe 10 years, the Chinese government basically said no more, and a lot of Chinese real estate is vacant, unoccupied, right? And China's property market has stalled for almost 10 years now, right? But since then, they have raised their investments in AI, self-driving driven cars, right? And a lot of technology. And that's what you see, like China in terms of innovation is not far behind. And funnily enough, I was reading today, um, Quen 3.6 model came out today, right? This is the first closed source model from China. All their models have been open source. They say that, like, the benchmark results that they've just shared, it is as good as Claude Opus 4.6,
Hmm.
and it's a fraction of a cost, right? So China isn't behind. And if China can provision all the compute, storage, power that is required to do this AI, like fulfill the AI demands, China will win, right? So it's very easy to get distracted and then have a completely wrong opinion about a country without ever stepping a foot in the country. But if anybody has any doubts, go spend some time there, go talk to people
Yeah.
there.
Yeah. I mean, it's easy for us to say we've stepped foot in China, and China's one of those countries where I don't think you can truly say anything about it and be 100% certain that it's going to be true, even if you've stepped in the country, right? There's a lot going on that even the Chinese public doesn't know about. But anyway,
I
so
don't think it's like you need to know the absolute 100% truth. But if you go in the country and talk to 50, 100 locals there, just about how they feel, how they work, how they operate, how is their business doing, and whatnot,
mhm,
I think you'll get a very good picture of what the country is.
yeah, yeah,
Right?
yeah.
Again,
This
I'm
is
not
fair.
saying by any means, I'm not saying that China is not communist. China is
Yeah,
communist country. They have a lot of controls. Chinese government wants control more than anything else.
yeah. This is true.
Right? So I don't want anybody to get me wrong on that front, but their internal policies, how they go about dealing with their population, their citizens or their civilians, is a lot more capitalistic than communist.
America relies on having a free market, even though it's burdened by debt and division and all this like government involvement, right? And China's the complete opposite. It relies on state control and central planning and digital surveillance essentially, right? So how is it that state control and all this like central planning is outpacing the America's like free market when it comes to technology and when it comes to AI? Cuz you would think that America would be doing a lot better than we actually are right now because of the economic model that we have.
Interesting question. And if you ask me candidly, I believe America, our markets are capitalistic, but our government is not.
Really?
Our government behavior is very, very socialist,
This I
right?
agree with, yeah.
So the government wants to provide everything, government wants to control everything. Now, coming back to your question, China is a perfect example where even though the country is communist, but they have figured out a hybrid model that they promote a lot of capitalistic behavior while retaining the control. The
Yeah.
biggest advantage of capitalism is competition, right? For don't let any monopolies or duopolies to come around. Give everybody a fair chance to fight. And when there is competition, the competition will drive the best prices and best quality for the customer, for the consumer, right? China does that very well, right?
Yeah.
Instead of China saying there will be one manufacturing plant that will manufacture this, they will say we want to manufacture a certain specific thing, let's say this pen, right? And they basically say any company that want to build this pen, we're going to provide you funding, right? Now these company internally will be competing and fighting to bring the price down with the highest quality. But since all of these have a lot of investment or funding from the government still has control, right? They are not state owned, they are state controlled. At least that's my
Yeah.
understanding.
Yeah.
Again, I'm not an expert on China, but from what I can see and what I read, it's a lot about state control versus state owned, right? If you let government do something, we know governments do a terrible job, right? But control can manifest in many different ways.
Let's get deeper on this because I think that AI has become the first active like representation of this ideological war between the US and China, especially in the 2020s. So America like has, the NVIDIA H200s IP, and China has all of the renewable energy. As you were saying, they have the rare earth that you need to manufacture these chips. So why is this AI arms race, why does it go it's so much deeper than just like software? Does it make sense what I'm asking? Like I'm trying to get into why it's not just like, oh, like Opus versus DeepSeek, things like that. Like at the fundamental, it's government versus government, right? It's a war on compute.
Correct. Um, let's go back 30, 40 years, like 1980s, when internet was up and coming in 1990s, and when internet was actually becoming mainstream. And 2000s is when like everything practically was on the internet. That time, US realized that they cannot stop internet. So they basically decided to become the best at the internet, right? And that's the reason we see all the big internet behemoths are American, right? Apple, Netflix, Facebook, you name it, Google, right?
Is Apple an internet behemoth?
Apple wouldn't have been anything if there was no internet, because without internet, iPhone would not be success, and without
This is
iPhone,
fair.
App Store would not be success. Sure,
Yeah.
iTunes came around, but iTunes also worked over internet. So we are in the same place, but a different world today. Internet was all about software.
Yeah.
Everything needed to be software, not that much of physical dependency, and that's what created the FANGs or the Mag 7 of the world. On AI, we're in the similar place where we cannot control it. No country can control it, right? Because it democratizes just like internet did. If you're not going to do it, somebody else will,
Yeah.
right? And because of internet, a consumer can be sitting anywhere in the world. They can get access to AI, even if their own country blocks it or decides not to do it. Right? For example, today you sitting in Australia can access ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini. They're all American. Or you could go to DeepSeek or Quinn or whatever, Chinese. Or you could pick up anything else from any other country or set up your own.
Yeah.
Right? So in this world, The challenge for the countries is they need a lot of investment in building the physical world. This is not about software. This is not about I'm going to create a website and millions of users can access it. For making AI to available for millions of users, you need to have that much of compute available, right? Today, like why do we keep hitting limits on your plans when you're trying to do anything on OpenAI or Cloud or anything? The main reason is the limitation is compute. Limitation is not that companies are greedy. If the companies can give you unlimited usage on a $20 plan, they will, right? They can monetize other ways. But the challenge is the compute. The compute just isn't available, right? So here, this is where China has a lead over America because of one, I showed the chart of power. We just don't have enough power. Our power is practically at the same level it was in 2005,
Yeah.
right? And on top of it, 75% of chips, which are a requirement to build anything, comes from China. And a lot of other supply chain also comes from China. Sure, you want to build solar power? Guess where the solar panels come from, right? You want to start using a lot more batteries? Guess where the batteries are manufactured, right? Okay, Tesla manufactures batteries in the United States, and somebody can argue. Guess what? All the raw material that goes into those batteries, where does that come from?
China.
Who produces or who refines the silver that gets used in in the batteries? China, right? And we saw a couple of months ago before Iran war when there was a big explosive growth in the precious metals.
Silver. Yeah.
China basically came out and said, sorry, we're not exporting any more silver, because silver for trade is very different than for silver for manufacturing,
Mm-hmm.
right? One is a paper trade, futures. I will settle for this. I will buy for this. I will buy for that. And at the end of the day, we'll mark to market. I pay you or you pay me, depending on who was right. And we all go home. No physical exchange. On the other hand, if you are a business that requires silver to go to complete the manufacturing process that you've laid out, if you don't get your hands on silver, you can't do anything.
Yeah.
And at one point
Yeah.
in time, I think there was like 35% premium on the physical, like Shanghai physical markets, over
Mm-hmm.
the CME silver price in the US.
Yeah.
So I think that's where the biggest challenge is.
I mean, who wins when like one country, when America has the software, it has the chips, but China has the energy and all of the materials needed? Who wins in this war?
Uh, I don't think there is a clear winner,
Okay.
because fortunately or unfortunately, at this stage, China and America, they both need each other. They can hate each other,
Why?
but they both need each other. Simple thing, trade. America, I was saying, majority of the supply chain comes from or through China, right? China, a big part of their consumption of their exports happen in the United States, right? So they both need each other. Right? It's not that 1945 UK is completely done. Only one country remaining that has done fantastic over the last few years. That becomes a
Yeah.
superpower. For
Yeah.
China to win this race completely, US has to do terrible things. Like if US dollar goes bust, if US government defaults on their debt, right? Like those are certain things. But for what it's worth, we have seen again this war has shown US dollar is still flight to safety for a lot of people, right? Dollar is getting stronger ever since the war started 5 weeks ago. Dollar is getting
Mm-hmm.
stronger. So I don't think there is a clear winner. I think we talked about this a few weeks ago. I still believe we are going from a unipolar to a multipolar world.
Yeah, where it we talked about how we won't have global superpowers, but we'll have regional superpowers. Okay.
And that
What
that
do
is
you
what also we are seeing. Again, it's not a prediction, but I wouldn't be surprised. Like at the final outcome of this Iran war is America actually leaving Middle East and basically saying, all right, Middle East, we are out. You guys deal with it. Europe can help if they want, or Russia can help, or whoever wants to help, or Israel can help.
Hmm.
We are out. We're going to take care of our side of the subcontinent or the hemisphere.
What what can you piece together about what China's end goal might be? Is it to replace America? Is it to become for the yuan? The it's called the yuan, right? It's the yuan,
Yeah.
not the yen.
Yuan or
Yen is
renminbi,
Japan.
right? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Is it for the yuan to become the world reserve instead of the US dollar? Or are they just hoping for the fall of America?
Okay. I personally feel China only wants one thing, and that one thing is control. They want to control everything, which means they want all the trade to happen in Chinese yuans, right? And we saw an example in the China in this sort of U.S. Iran war. At least two ships crossed Strait of Hormuz because they paid. I think it was 2 million worth of Chinese yuan,
Mhm.
right? And then took to cross, which is
Yeah.
like, sure, I would have loved for it to be a Bitcoin or something else, but this gives you an idea who is the silent partner in the war, who's trying to do what, right? The other way to think about this is when you know your opponent is aggressive, full of anger, all you want is to go and burn their energy on somebody else. So when they're in front of you, they're drained out. What is happening right now? US is burning billions of dollars a day in this war. Who's sitting and just chilling? China, right?
What is America's current game plan here? I mean, with the war, like with the war and with China, what are you seeing that the current administration is trying to position the US as?
Honestly, I don't think US government has any plan.
Really?
Their
Okay.
initial, like, this is what me trying to piece together a story, and I have two versions of the story. The one
Okay.
version is they completely miscalculated how the war will go. They thought they will go in and kind of eliminate the supreme leaders of the regime, and the regime will collapse,
Yeah.
right? And regime will collapse. That will bring Iran on their knees, and they will basically beg for pardon and come to a deal and whatnot. That did not happen. The regime was better prepared in a more hub and spoke model where supreme leaders were not the central authorities. They were sure they were central, but they also had a lot of distributed control. Just like Western defense works the same way, right? Like it's not that the chief commander of the army has will make all the decisions. The individual
Well,
battalions will be able to
yeah.
make decisions too, in case the chief is not available. Right? They have some sort of autonomy, some sort of self decision making and whatnot. So that's one. Second, I think neither U.S. nor Israel thought that Iran would be able to put a chokehold on Strait of Hormuz, right? And the war we are in right now, the the odds are very different. U.S. and Israel are trying to decimate Iran, right? Basically, bring them on their knees and then plea,
Yeah.
and like beg for mercy and whatnot. And what Iran has to do simply is just to keep pushing back for a little bit longer. And the other thing that Iran did, again, I'm not saying war is good, but what was very smart when they started attacking the neighboring countries, especially the bases of US in the neighboring countries, they basically increased the surface area for US and Israel to focus on. Now they are shooting up a 50,000 or some people are even saying it's like $5,000, $7,000 drone, and the interceptors that they have to use to stop it cost millions of dollars, and sometimes more than one are required. So Iran is throwing a few $1,000 thing, and we are throwing a few $1 million thing to intercept it. Guess who's going to go
Yeah,
bankrupt first,
this is true.
right? So like that's one story. I think it completely got it completely moved on not according to their plan. And that's what makes me feel they initially didn't have plan, and that's the reason we are also seeing Trump kind of changing his tone on initially, they are done this and that, and the Strait of Hormuz is part of the negotiation, and very recently he came out and said, oh, that was
Hmm.
never our objective. US doesn't need anything that comes from Strait of Hormuz. We produce a lot of oil ourselves. The countries who
Yeah.
need this should come in and defend Strait of Hormuz and whatnot. Like that's one side of the story. The other side of the story is this is more, I would say, conspiracy theory, lack of a better word. This is where I feel this is a staged war. This is part of the overall changing of the world order, right? And in this case, somebody else is pulling the threads. And again, this is another version that I've heard from some places, and me trying to put two pieces together. Don't know if it is right or wrong, but another version is where all these Middle Eastern countries that have been working hard to change the image of the region to be a safe, business friendly region, they wanted to eliminate Iran. They might have put a ton of pressure on America to proceed with these attacks, not expecting what happened. So I don't know which of these stories is true. They both sound pretty, in line in terms of, yeah, I can
Yeah.
see why it's moving in that direction. But all in all, I think the end result is this war is not going to last long. I don't think this is a forever war,
Hmm.
right? It will, like, some sort of negotiation will happen. The key
Yeah.
thing is who's going to lose out of it. And I think the biggest loser out of it will be Israel.
This I can see. Yeah. I understand a little bit as to why. Let's talk a bit about money. Let's talk a bit about Bitcoin actually. So the US government holds like roughly, I think it's about like 328,000 Bitcoin, and China controls about like 190,000 Bitcoin, if my numbers are correct.
Who
And
knows? They've never done the audit,
yeah,
right? We were promised an
this
audit
is
last
true.
year. Now, never
Yeah,
happened.
this is true. This is true. Um, but what I'm trying to ask is, despite every effort that China has taken to officially ban Bitcoin, both of these countries are sitting on massive digital treasuries, right? So why are the two most powerful governments in the world trying to hoard an asset that's completely decentralized that they can't control? Why are they accumulating Bitcoin?
I think they have tried to ban it many times. Like internet, they can't ban it, they can't control it. So they have to co-opt it.
Hmm.
But both countries will come with their own ways of co-opting it. China might come on, okay, you know what, they might not. Again, this is all a hypothetical world, but one world I can see is where China says, hey, Chinese citizens, you cannot hold Bitcoin directly, but you can have digital coin that is produced by Chinese government, which is backed by Bitcoin.
But it's still controlled by the Chinese government.
Correct. So, like, think of a digital yuan Bitcoin kind of thing.
Okay.
like something of that sort, where they still have control, and that's the only thing their citizens can get access to,
Mm-hmm.
right? Which gives them the exposure, but doesn't give them the freedom to take their money and leave, right? US, on the other hand, is going to do completely opposite. Like our previous government, previous administration tried to ban it, go heavy-handed after
Yeah.
all the crypto companies, banks were debanking people who were dealing crypto and whatnot. And funny story, um, I don't know if I told you this or not. A few months ago, I was transferring some money over to you, and and we use Wise for that. And in that, I
Yeah.
basically said, okay, this money is to go buy some Sats or BTC or something of that
Yeah.
sort. The transaction was first blocked and then canceled, right? It was a couple $100. It was not like I'm sending you tens of thousands. It was a couple $100. I think it was your birthday or something. Like, here is something. Go buy
Yeah.
some BTC kind of stuff,
Yeah.
and it blocked. Then I had to basically say, hey, okay, birthday gifts, and then
Okay.
transaction went through. So it's like that kind of control. And Vice is not even an American company,
Yeah,
but
it's
they operate
European.
in America, so they have to follow American laws because Vice US is different
Okay.
than Vice, similar to
Yeah.
Revolut versus Revolut
Yeah.
US. Um, so I think US will co-opt in a different way, where they would be all about, okay, you know what, we need to know what you're doing with it, and we need to get our share whenever you sell it,
Mm-hmm.
right? And until that clarity comes, right? And they basically don't go to a point where they say, okay, there is a minimum threshold. If you're selling below that, it's just like money. Don't have to worry. Don't know need of
Yeah.
reporting. For example, like if you take your $100 bill today and go and spend it, you don't have to go and report I spent $100.
Yeah. Exactly.
But if you go and sell $100 worth of Bitcoin, or buy something using Bitcoin, you have to report that you've sold $100 worth of Bitcoin, right? Until that thing doesn't get resolved, I don't know what that minimum threshold would be, 600, 500, 1,000, 10,000 in a year, God knows. Until that happens, in the US, Bitcoin would never become a medium of exchange, because every transaction becomes a taxable event. And it's a tax reporting nightmare,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? Imagine how many times an American taps their card every day. If every time they have to keep track of how many sats you transferred and what was their cost basis, and what was the value when you sent it or spent it, and then track it and then pay tax on that, it's like nightmare.
Why is our current administration a little bit more bullish on crypto than the last one?
Because there is no other way to save the US dollar.
Crypto's the way to save. I guess with stable coins, I understand why.
They're not bullish on Bitcoin. Nah, don't get me wrong. They might individually as a person might be,
Yeah, but not the
right?
government
I
as
know
the
Trump
entity.
family is.
Yeah.
I know Scott Bessent is a
Mhm.
Bitcoiner. I know Howard Lutnick is a Bitcoiner,
Mhm.
and there are a few other Bitcoin supporters in the administration. Doesn't mean that they will have a legislation that will pass through Congress, and that will basically allow the US government to buy Bitcoin.
Mhm.
But they will definitely make something around stable coins, because that is the only plausible option available to save US treasuries.
So it's the same thing as essentially what you said China might be doing, right? They would adopt stable coins in order to keep dollar dominance because the alternative is a complete decentralized
Yeah,
network.
yeah.
Okay, so it sounds like the US and China are working to the same thing.
Um, mostly, mostly, mostly. The other thing to note is, like, when a government holds Bitcoin in their custody, that much is less available for the citizens to buy. That's one way to control, right? Imagine if 20 million Bitcoin are already in circulation, let's say like 1 million Satoshi is gone and leave 5 million for others, other hodlers and whatnot. But the rest, 14 million, is held by likes of strategy or the governments who are basically, zip tie it and say, we're not going to touch it. We're not going to let anybody buy it. What happens?
Yep. Yeah.
Right. And that is the reason I think for, like Jeff Booth says it, Bitcoin needs to stay decentralized and secure. And decentralization means individuals need to self custody it,
Hmm.
not, rely on the governments. The more individuals have in self custody, the better Bitcoin is going to be.
I said in the beginning of this episode that we would talk a little bit about the stuff that Balaji predicts and the frameworks that he uses. So one of the frameworks that he talks about is how he sees the world moving towards a space where we have a superpower with about 1 billion people, aka China, versus like 1,000 network states with 1 million people each, the internet, right? And then he also talks about how stable coins and Bitcoin might become or are the currencies of the internet. Do you agree with that? Do you think this is a feasible prediction, I guess, for where the world is headed?
Um, I agree with most of it. And here's the reason why. With the rise of internet, the first thing that started happening was information became democratized.
Mm-hmm.
Earlier, to get information, you had to buy a newspaper, buy books, or go to the library and whatnot. Now you could sit in front of a computer, open your browser, type in a website, go to Google, go to Yahoo, search for something, you'll get the information. That was the
Mm-hmm.
first step. Until then, nobody cared. Oh, it's like information sharing. People are writing their thoughts, and the rise of blogging came and whatnot, entertainment. And then internet started going after media. In the beginning, all the electronic media, electronic news was free. The newspapers were paid. Like you could go to NY Times, the website was free, newspaper was paid. And the logic was it takes a lot of money to print a newspaper and then deliver it, right? But then what happened was people stopped buying these, print newspapers. They started consuming electronic. And that's when you suddenly start seeing everything is getting paywalled,
Yeah, behind a paywall.
right? So what happened is internet basically killed media, right? NY Times and all these things started getting paywalled. A lot of other independent journalists and everybody started rising up. And then came social media along. And now, like, a lot of people consume news from X, Instagram, or TikTok and whatnot. And then whatever you are interested in, you will go dig into it. And now, AI is another player in there. You don't even have to
Yeah.
go to a news website. Like, I
Yeah.
don't know when I was the last time I went on to NY Times and whatnot, right?
Yeah.
Or even Wall Street Journal. Right? So that the first step that happened. Then it then came crypto, right? Crypto basically took control of money away from the government. So earlier, governments controlled two major things: media and money, right? Media was first rebuttal from internet. Basically, internet killed the media. And
Yeah.
now, like, I don't know how many people like of your generation even open CNN or Fox News or whatever. I don't know. I don't watch them anymore. With crypto, the money control also went away. That is the reason we saw the aggression in the last administration, because they were losing control of money. Yeah. So
Yeah.
now, if you extend that theory and say, what is the last thing that governments control? Is the citizens. And with internet based money, internet based information, especially with AI coming along, wouldn't it be easier if you could be part of a community, not where you were born, but where your values align, where your
Yeah.
beliefs align, where, what you want to work on and how you want to add value to the larger society
Hmm.
aligns. That's what his thesis is. I'm definitely paraphrasing. People should listen to
Yeah.
what he says in his words.
Yeah.
But that's my understanding. So I see that as a total plausible thing. And in this world, there will be a lot of push back from the governments, especially the Western governments, in terms of increasing the control, increasing the surveillance,
We're already
and
seeing this, right? With
we are seeing this.
CBDCs and digital IDs.
Correct. And with the rise of AI, like with rise of AI, it is not very hard to know what Nikki did yesterday for the governments, right? It doesn't take too long if like I was reading in as a several years old data point where I read an average American is photographed about 1,000 times a day on all these signals, the cameras, the stores, the offices, like wherever you go, you're getting photographed. And with all the timestamps, sure, a human might take a long time, but AI could piece together everything and give the entire history of what you did, where you went, at what time, with who, and what you did, the whole thing in fraction of a second.
Pretty much, it's not going to be hard, right? Take a look at like the Amazon Go stores that use sensors and computer
Yeah,
vision to
yeah.
see you and see what you shop. In theory, it's or not in theory, in practice, it's really cool because you walk in, walk out. But think about the amount of surveillance. Think about the amount that you're actually being watched as you're doing your grocery shopping. That could extend to pretty much anything. So that part is
And guess
actually,
what? We are humans. We are happily giving more and more data to these AIs about us. I'll give you an
yeah,
example. We have a ring camera in front, right? Today morning, I was pulling my car on the driveway and ring somebody came. Oh, a silver car is reversing on the driveway. Yeah. And then I stepped out and walking in. A man is walking inside the house, inside the door. Like, what?
yeah. There was a lot of discourse around the Ring Super Bowl ad, which I don't know if you watched it, what you saw the ad when you were watching the Super Bowl, but it was basically, them saying that they now like are able to Ring is now able to recognize objects, and so the entire premise was like, you lost your dog, your neighbors can check their cameras to see where your dog is. And there was a lot of discourse on the internet about this because it was essentially surveillance, right? They're like, yes, you can go find your dog, but do you think that they're using this for dog? Do you know who has access to this data? Like the governments, whoever has access to this data, because you can buy access, is now tracking people,
Yeah,
seeing where they're going.
yeah. That's exactly what the Western governments want.
So, what brings me to say is we talk a lot about AI on this channel. We talk a lot about using it to increase your productivity, using it as leverage, but how do you can you even protect yourself from the surveillance that AI brings?
I think you can do few things. You can't protect yourself completely, right? And that's where our whole thesis of not only financial sovereignty, but location sovereignty becomes important, right? You should be able to choose where you want to live, not force where you want to live. And again, coming back to Balaji's reference, Balaji says one thing which I really like. He says, especially for the young generation, second passport before your first home.
Second passport before your first one?
First home.
First home. Okay, okay.
So before you go and buy a house, get a second passport first, right? Because that gives you options, right? Younger generation, you guys, you have a lot of time. Go, you know, research on what countries have supporting policies to the causes that you care about, to the beliefs that you hold, and go figure out a way to get a residency, get a passport, and whatnot. And for my generation, I think it's better to, if you have some money, take some money, get your plan B, C, D, E, F sorted. Because not just one plan. What if the country where you get this option turns around because a new administration comes and the whole thing can flick. That's
I mean,
exactly
this
what's
is
going to happen in
happening.
2028,
Exactly, yeah.
right? Like based on what I see here, just to digress for a little bit, I think Republicans are going to lose in the midterm, given the state of the economy. With the war is prolonged. Like everybody's feeling the pressure. The economy is not doing great. So all the promises that Trump won on in 2024, it doesn't feel like any one of them got fulfilled, right? At least not to the masses, right? And his the favorable ratings are at the lowest point right now, if I'm not wrong, which makes me feel he will lose. He will lose, which will basically become a stalemate. Nothing will be done
Yeah.
for next 2 years. Nothing, right? It will be all about impeachment, 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 impeachment. There will be nothing else. And in that world, because first 2 years nothing was done that at least made the Americans feel that yes, they are doing better than they did 2 years ago. And the next 2 years, nothing will get done anyway, which will mean it will be a big blue wave in 2028, which will mean the surveillance will be doubled down on, right? So I think Western countries will definitely lean towards that. We are seeing the rise of surveillance, rise of control in
In
the
Europe.
West and China, right? So in this world, if you should have options. And if you cannot leave the country for whatever reason, have an option to go to a remote place, like where there is not much incentive for the government to set up the infrastructure to surveil 50 people. Right? If you're in the remotest part of the country where like you don't even have a cell tower, for an example, you could use Starlink for your internet and whatnot, if you have to. Then there is not enough infrastructure for the government to surveil that area. Right? Now you can say, okay, so if you can use Starlink to reach to internet, probably Starlink could be used for surveillance too. But given an option, 50 people versus 5 million people neighborhood, guess where the chances of surveillance are higher, right? Best ROI.
Yeah.
So I
This
think
feels
those
like
are the two
something
two
out
things
of.
I would say. I don't think it is a place where you can say, oh, I'm gonna completely like you boycotting AI will not protect you,
Yeah.
right? So like any new innovation, what usually happens is there is, as I say, whenever you have freedom, there is responsibility. Now the choice is who uses AI for what. I would say if you use AI for productive use, you can be way more efficient, way more productive, and generate a lot more value much, much faster. But on the other hand, you could use AI to do a lot of destructive work too,
This is true.
right? A lot of people will be scammed in the near future just because of AI, because now cloning voices, cloning videos is not hard. Like you could be receiving a call tomorrow where saying, hey, dad or mom are in serious trouble. They are in hospital. They made an accident. You need to do this, or send me this money because I don't have anything to pay
Yeah.
for them. And you'll be like, you might fall for it. So like people have to be very, very cautious because this technology, while it has a lot of good promise, also brings a lot of, threats as well. And we have to be careful.
This brings me to ask, why is it that boycotting AI won't make a difference?
Question is, I think cat is already out of the bag. So like we
Okay.
talked a few weeks ago, a group of people, one, two, three companies deciding we're not going to do it, we're not going to use it, will not stop everybody.
This is true.
So it's the same thing. Once the guns were out, the only choice you had was to buy a gun, right? You don't save yourself from gun with a sword. You save yourself with a gun.
Coming back to this framework of the network state, let's connect it to some of the stuff that we were talking about in the last episode with Red America, Blue America, Internet America versus China, right? Is Internet America a representation of what a network state could look like, or is it different?
Uh, Partly. Depends on what part of the country you are in.
What
If you are in a
defines
blue
Internet
state,
America?
so so what defines Internet America is where you have property rights, where you have freedom of speech, where you would not be cancelled for saying one thing that that somebody doesn't like.
But this is what happens on the internet.
Really? How many
Yeah,
people
people
have
get
been cancelled on Instagram, on YouTube, on X in the past?
plenty.
That means it's not free state. It's not freedom of speech. So
So
it's
then
not
Internet
Internet
America
America.
is not a free state.
So that's what I'm saying, right? So if you're looking at big tech, it's not Internet America
Yeah.
anymore.
Okay, so big
That's
tech is not
controlled
Internet
by
America.
big tech.
Okay.
Is not right. It's more about smaller internet-based startups where you could build something where government is not going to come and sit on your head, especially if you're trying to build something around crypto, right?
Mhm.
Imagine being in a California or Washington State or New York in between 2020 and 2024 and trying to, especially after 2022, after FTX collapse, and trying to build a Bitcoin company. Guess what will happen, right? You will like nobody would bank with let you bank there. Like you would not get any investments. You would not like you would be harassed every day by a lot of administration, sending you random investigation, threats and whatnot.
Yeah.
That's BS. So if you ask me, I think there are only two states which are somewhat in that bucket. Like if you want to do something in America around tech, around crypto or Bitcoin, Austin or Miami. Period. Nothing
Texas or
else.
Florida?
No San Francisco, no Seattle, no New York, no Washington D.C. Nothing. Right?
Why?
Those are the only two places. Other than that, I think the best places would be Singapore, Dubai. Sure, there is some effects of war, but they'll be over soon. I'm pretty confident. Or other smaller countries which are which these are the countries which will see this as an opportunity. Oh, there's a decline in these developed nations. This is our chance to hit hard on it and capitalize on this opportunity. And a lot of
China?
smaller countries will pop up. Like think of this, in last few years, the rise in digital nomad visas from the countries is on the is going through the roof. Right? While US is pushing against H1Bs, right? We are seeing a lot of pressure that's being put on those. China is opening up the STEM visas.
Yeah.
Right? They are saying
Because
if you work
countries
in
need
STEM, come over.
people. And they need people skilled with the internet.
Exactly. That's what is happening in the West, where the right wing basically says immigration is bad,
Mhm.
be nationalist, and blue is living in a fallacy of there is a still our kingdom or our empire, which practically doesn't exist anymore, but they still want to live in the fallacy and continue moving forward like that.
How do you become a digital nomad? How do you start living, working on the internet?
I think this is where connecting the dots with AI, internet, Bitcoin come together. So,
Okay.
what do I mean by that? If you can figure out a way to use AI to create value for other people, that will translate to income, right? That's the first step. If you can figure that way out, internet can give you freedom to do that, provide that service from anywhere else, anywhere you want to be, right? And if you convert your income into Bitcoin, that gives you protection that you could walk with your wealth anywhere in the world, wherever you want, and nobody can prove or deny you have it, right? So the first step is figuring out how do you use AI to create value. All of these digital nomad visas, they require you to show some sort of income. So all of these basically say that you have an active income. So you're not going to come here and look for a job in the country or become dependent on the welfare in the country. You have an income that you would, use when you are here. And the reason they are doing this is because when a person who has income from outside, they're not consuming resources from the country, but they're spending their money in the country, that will create employment and boost the economy of the country. That is the prime reason why these countries want these visas, right? So, for example, what you are doing with content creation, right? You could do it from anywhere. Like you are sitting in Australia, I'm sitting here in Seattle, right? We can have the conversation. Doesn't matter. Like tomorrow, I could be in India and you could be in Thailand, and we can have the same conversation. Nothing changes.
Yeah, this makes sense. This is going to be a bit of a packed question, but how does one start to make money on the internet?
I think it's starting from how do I make money is a wrong starting.
But everyone needs money.
Correct. But how do you get money? You get money by adding value, creating value for others. So you have to create value for the other person, somebody else, for them to pay you. So focusing on what is that one thing that you can create value for others better than a lot of other people, and you can scale it. That's the important part. Because if you can, and this is where the employees struggle. As an employee, you can only create value for one business. That puts a cap on how much money can you make. But when you are a freelancer or a business owner, you can create value for multiple customers. The more customers you can serve, the more value you create, the more money you make. So focus on a skill that can help you create value for others, that is scalable, is the most important piece.
Let's start to kind of wrap things up here. Um, I guess the last question I'm going to ask you then is, if you're young right now, what is the best thing that you can do to protect yourself as we're going through this whole US China ideological war, changing of the global order, and everything?
So I would say the most important thing I would say is don't bet on any one country collapsing. Don't bet against US capital markets, right? I would rather say bet on how you can be a better individual and how can you exit the system. That's your exit path. Bitcoin is your escape valve. You just need to find the escape velocity, right? That's the most important thing. Like people who are basically saying, like, let's think about this for a minute, right? A lot of Bitcoiners talk about, oh, the dollar will completely collapse, the debt market will completely collapse. Do you have an idea how large the debt market is? Right? The debt market is $350 trillion. That's 3 times bigger than world GDP.
Mm-hmm.
What is it all standing on? US Treasury, practically. Right? Just 7 trillion of that is sitting in money market funds and CDs. 7 trillion. Imagine dollar going to zero. The world will burn.
Yep.
It's not going to happen overnight. And it's better not happen overnight,
Yeah, that would be
because
really
otherwise
bad for
world would be a
everyone.
very chaotic place,
Yep.
right? So I would say as an individual, focus on getting the high value skills, figuring out way to create value, figuring out way to scale that value for others, generate as much income as you can, and convert that income to an asset that doesn't lose value and aligns with the thesis of financial sovereignty and location sovereignty.
Yeah, I think if you're listening to this and you're young, or even if you're not, in your like 20s or anything, your job right now is literally just stop being a casualty of this fiat war that we have going on between the US and China. If you're watching this, you might be American. Chances are actually pretty high that you are American. We're not any better. America's not going to save you. Um, my dad and I have talked about this a lot. We always talk about using AI as leverage to scale your productivity, to make you some money, and then using Bitcoin as your mathematical exit away from the US dollar, right? It's the ultimate treasury that I think no central planner or inflating empire or anything can control or dilute. So, I think that is everything that I had to say for today's episode. Dad, do you have any final thoughts before we wrap?
Now, I think you covered it well. The only thing I'll double down on what you said is nobody's coming to save you. Save yourself, learn about things, learn what is happening, and build your plan.
Exactly. Speaking of plans, if you guys want an insight into how I'm building my plan and this playbook that I am using to, build with AI, protect with Bitcoin, definitely go check out a new newsletter that I've started called Orange Peel Concentrate that is on Substack, but I also post them over on X. So those links will be down in the description below. And if this episode was interesting to you, if you got any sort of value out of this episode, then definitely let us know in the comments. Subscribe to this channel, hit that like button, and share it with someone who needs to wake up and actually see the chessboard of what's going on in the world right now. So, with that being said, stay curious, stay skeptical, and stay orange pilled. I'm your host, Nicki, and this is my dad, Global HODL. We will both see you next Sunday for Satoshi Sundays number 13.